is Singaporean President who is in India this week. It's marking a significant milestone in the 60th year of diplomatic ties between the two sides. He's met Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar with discussions to focus on India-Singapore relations, which particularly include focus on non-traditional areas of cooperation like energy, industrial parks, semiconductors likely to be a major focus area, skills being another key priority. This will be the Singaporean leader's first state visit to India and the first by any Singapore president to India in the last 10 years. Now, they've already elevated their partnership. What does this mean going forward? What will be their priority areas from technology to skills? Let's get in my colleague Mohammad Ghazali to really connect the dots for us and explain to us the significance of this visit. Go ahead, Ghazali, explain to us.
Singapore President is visiting for the next 3 days. He is here in India. He will be visiting Odisha. That is one part of the visit. But before moving to Odisha, he'll be meeting the President, the Honorable President, the Honorable Prime Minister. Today evening, his meeting with the External Affairs Minister is also scheduled. Now, why these meetings are very important? Because last year in September, when Prime Minister Modi visited Singapore, a lot of announcements were made. A lot of intention was being shown that perhaps Singapore is also very interested in investing in India. So you will see all those announcements being materialized when the Singapore's president here meets the Prime Minister. A joint statement is also expected to be issued. Besides that, the areas which you mentioned that may see a lot of cooperation would be in semiconductor. Also, India and Singapore are jointly holding and sort of skills development centers in India. One is running in Odisha, the others are running in 6 different states. So the Singapore president will also visit those centers to see the progress and how they are operating. Besides that, the digital payment initiative, which India or which is working in Singapore, has been inspired by India. So besides defense, energy and other sectors, semiconductor will be one area which will be under focus, because Prime Minister spoke that how Singapore will be the anchor of this entire semiconductor industry to officiate in India. So for that, Singapore's support will be needed. We also know that how it has been the leading contributor when it comes to FDI in India. So besides that, cultural connectivity between India and Singapore has been talked about. Just recently before his visit, one of the Singapore's minister had said that how Indian community in Singapore has been the top contributors when it comes to different areas or sectors there for its growth. So these connect, or these issues will certainly be discussed. And as you rightly pointed out, this is the first visit in the last 10 years by the president or head of the state of Singapore. So that itself carries a lot of weightage.
All right. Appreciate you taking out the time to explain that to us in detail. Mohammad Ghazali giving us the details as far as Singapore President's visit. All right, let's get you the big questions that we are asking, or rather the big themes that we are putting out to our guests this evening as to the significance of Singapore President's visit. The first question is that will Singapore help bridge India's skill gap? Remember, skill is going to be a key priority and focus for the Singaporean President in this visit, and how much will this boost our skilling needs? The second question is, how will Singapore push in India's semiconductor mission? That's likely to be, in my opinion, the key theme between India and Singapore relationship over the next decade. It will be defined to a large extent by semiconductors. And the other is that, can Singapore help drive India's digital future technology? How much of it can it be? Which are the areas where technology collaboration is likely to really take off, where they could define it going forward? And that will be another key priority area. But remember, how can India-Singapore work to counter China is going to be another area that may come up. Remember, China is a very large investor in Singapore, and also 67% of Singaporeans are actually of Chinese descent. But the fact is, China matters in that region, and how much can it play out between India and Singapore is something that we're going to ask. And what's next in terms of India's Act East policy? Singapore sits at the cusp of India's Act East policy, and how will it take that forward is another key question that we'll put to our panelists joining me today. All right, let's get in Amitendu Patil, who's joining me as well, and Amitendu Palit, who's joining me from Delhi, and of course we have Manju, Seth, to talk to us about the significance of India-Singapore ties, and more importantly, where could they go from here? So from Manju, Seth, let me start with you. Potential possibilities are there, but in your assessment, what do you think could be the overarching theme of India-Singapore ties going forward?
As you very rightly mentioned, you know, it's a strategic partnership. which was established last year, will be further strengthened, and this will cover the entire gamut of the relationship. And the key areas will be, I think, defense, security, and skills development, of course, and the digital aspect on both sides, the collaboration in the digital and digitalization, and of course, a very important, crucial is the semiconductor and chips manufacturing. I think there will be collaboration there because Singapore has some strengths there. We have some strengths there, but yes, it has to be. I think Singapore has more compared to us, a little more strength in that area, and together I think we can work together to increase the manufacturing facility, establish manufacturing facilities in India. And I also feel that since this is the 60th year of our diplomatic relations, it will be a signal of the strong and very, very crucial relationship that we've had over the years. Our Act East, Singapore is a very important element, an important player in our Act East policy. And again, sizable diaspora there.
Okay. Hold your thought there, sir. Hold your thought there, ma'am. I want to get in Mr. Palit as well to talk about some of these priorities. Let's take them one by one. Mr. Palit, in your assessment, how important would be, let's say, semiconductors and skills, which could really be the overarching theme of the Singaporean president's visit this time?
Thank you so much for inviting me onto the show, Gaurie. And in fact, you'd recall that when Prime Minister Modi was in Singapore around 4 months ago, and the comprehensive strategic partnership that was worked out at that point in time, it mentioned 4 themes, and you have brought up all the 4 themes out here, out of which semiconductor and skills are sizably important in terms of their immediate requirements and the way they have been progressing. I think with respect to semiconductors, there's a very interesting realization which has come across most countries of the world, that there's no country in the world which can claim to have complete proficiency in semiconductor supply chains. So when it comes to the chips, whether they are the legacy chips, which are of a somewhat older generation, or the advanced chips, nobody actually owns the majority of production, and to that extent can command a strategic influence by claiming to own the chips. Where India has come into the story is kind of as a late starter. Today we see India at a point in time where India is beginning to figure prominently in the supply chain of semiconductors, but more towards the lower end. Most of the semiconductor functioning in India right now is in the assembly, testing, and packaging segment. But there are some research and development functions which are coming in. I think where Singapore is aiming to come in the India story is somewhat in the middle level of the game, which is in the establishment of fabrication units, which will be bringing out these chips for their eventual amalgamation into the devices and the civilian and non-civilian purposes for which they are used. It's a very vital role. It's a very vital role simply because of the fact that India is aspiring to become a global semiconductor hub in the next 5 to 10 years. And with that objective in mind, India needs to collaborate effectively and strategically with countries at various levels. So, for example, there's a collaboration with the United States that is going on. There's a collaboration with Taiwan that is going on, and there's a collaboration with Singapore that's going on.
Hold your thought there, sir. Hold your thought. I'm going to come to that the semiconductor bit as well in greater detail. But there's another aspect that I want to touch upon, which is that, we're talking about the economic ties, we're talking about business ties. What about the political aspect of this relationship, the geopolitical dimensions of this? We've talked about the geo-economic part of it, the geotech part of it, but there's the geopolitical aspect of this, isn't it? Manju, Seth.
Absolutely, the geopolitical aspect is very strong, and with China very, very closely, should I say, embedded in all of Southeast Asia, included in Singapore, very strong ties, a lot of investments, a lot of trade. So it is a little, a kind of challenge, should I say, for India and Singapore to become, really very, very close. But already, I think, over the years, if you see, though China has always been active in Southeast Asia and Singapore, even then, we've had fairly robust ties with most countries in Southeast Asia, and including with Singapore. With Singapore, it's always been a very good relationship. And I think the geopolitical aspect is important because the leaders there have always looked at India in a positive way over the years, and we've had very good relationships in all sectors, of course, in education and other in trade. But now with these new emerging technologies coming in, and and the fact that they have skills there and they would like to be involved, their investments are quite high in India, so we can work together on innovation, on manufacturing, and very rightly, semiconductors and chips are the future.
Mr. Amitendu, you want to comment on the geopolitical aspect of this relationship?
I think the geopolitical relationship between the two countries has taken a decisive turn with the growth of the idea of the Indo-Pacific. Now, when we look at this construct, and if you look back in the past, the primary regional concept was the APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. India was never really a part of the APEC group. It couldn't. It did become a part of the ASEAN framework as an ASEAN +1 partner, but then we had the episode where India did not join the RCEP because of its own concerns over a number of things. But today, over the last 5 years, when we look back and see at the trajectory of regional relationships, we have the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This is one framework which, given the size of its economic might, is the largest regional bloc in the world in terms of the number of people it has in it and the share of the world GDP that it has in it. And India and Singapore are very prominent players in that Indo-Pacific Economic Partnership, along with the United States, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and several other Southeast Asian countries. I think the important part of this understanding is today India and Singapore are collaborating at a regional level on very big cross-cutting issues. And these are not just about, defense matters, but these are on issues of clean tech, disaster management, financial cooperation, now all of which have a strategic impact and all of which also have a geopolitical impact in today's world. For example, they're talking closely about green shipping. They're talking about urban infrastructure cooperation in a variety of areas. They're talking about how to manage skills and skill synergies on both sides.
Indeed.
Now, all of these cannot happen unless and until there is a certain degree of geopolitical comfort which both sides have with each other. I think that's
I
the
agree
point
with you there, sir. That work can happen only when there is geopolitical comfort between the two partners to take that relationship forward. Running out of time, but very quickly, Manju said, I haven't asked you the question about the China factor. How much do you think that's going to play around as far as the India-Singapore relationship is concerned? Because in the Indo-Pacific, India also wants to counter China in a sense to ensure that there is no regional hegemony of China in this region.
Absolutely, and China has been very assertive. It has been very, very active in ensuring that its writ runs especially in the South China Sea and in the Indo-Pacific. And I think for Singapore, they have managed to balance, I think, over the years, a very good balance between their relationship with China, with India. And I think Singapore will continue to do that. And I think we can depend on Singapore as a friend of India.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me on this edition of India Global.